welcome everyone. Thank you for joining Racial Justice Rising for today's conversation about our schools and how we can move the ideas of diversity, equity, and inclusion in our schools from empty words to actions. Before anything else, we want to let you know how much we appreciate the amazing local cultural councils who support our programs. And at the end of this program, we'll tell you exactly who they are. Before I actually introduce our speakers, we have a little request from Racial Justice Rising. If you could use the chat to let us know if you're either a parent or guardian of a child who attends public schools, or if you're an educator. Thanks. And if you don't know how to find the chat, on most computers, if you put your, I think most computers, if you put your, and phones, I'm not sure, if you put your mouse or your finger on the screen along the bottom or along the top, there's a row of possibilities, and one of them is chat. Thank you. So our presenters today are two very experienced education professionals, Varinda Robinson and Letha King-Brooks. Varinda specializes in school improvement and leadership. She is a dynamic mentor for new teachers and administrators, and her work improves student achievement while cultivating new leadership. She's deeply dedicated to the growth and development of both students and staff, and has over 30 years of experience as a teacher, assistant principal, supervisor, and district level program administrator. Varinda has extensive experience in federal and state funding and school improvement strategies and best practices, and her mentoring has transformed schools and districts from warning status to full accreditation. Letha King-Brooks has 20 years of experience in positively impacting the education of Virginia's youth. She's currently the supervisor of school improvement in Newport News, and she's also served as director of curriculum and instruction for the Virginia Department of Juvenile Justice. She's been a classroom teacher, department chair, assistant principal, STEM director, supervisor of curriculum and instruction, and she has organized and facilitated and presented at conferences and professional development events. She's passionate about equity, education, and leadership, and believes that a sound education and equitable access to opportunities will open otherwise closed doors. During the presentation, we'd like to ask everybody to shut off both your audio and video so that we can better focus on the presenters. Thank you. And now, Varinda and Letha.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sharon. I am going to share my screen so that we can get started. Varinda.
Okay, good morning to everyone, and we are extremely excited to have everyone on board and just willing to continue to grow. As you can see, our intro is knowledge is like a garden. If it is not cultivated, it cannot be harvested. So that is going to be our focus, our drive, and we're going to deviate here and there with some additional information so that you can take your knowledge and begin to expand and hopefully pollinate what we have taught and what we are gaining from you all, and it can be pollinated throughout your individual communities as well as from one state to the other. As we looked at the individuals that are here today, we have them from, I do believe, Texas, of course, Ohio, Massachusetts, and Letha and I are in Virginia, and I saw one of my work family members, Dr. Claudia Hines, is also here with us from Virginia. So I'd like to welcome everyone, and hopefully we will be able to not only share, but also gain a great deal of knowledge, because as we always say, education is lifelong. So let's take a look at this number. What does this number mean to you? Just begin to process in your own head and look at it. 9, 0, 2, 3, 1. You can also look at it as 90,231. What is that number? What is the significance of that particular number? Is it the population of your city? Is it a zip code? I know a lot of people probably say, yeah, that sounds like 90210. Yes, it is a zip code, but that's not the purpose of this one. Happens to be San Diego, I do believe. Is it the cost of your first house, or possibly the payment that you receive on your first job? I wish it was for me, but it is not. 90,231 in this particular case happens to be the number of hours the average individual is working in their lifetime. 90,000 hours of working with people that could be related to you, but for the most part, most of the time they are not. That is a lot of hours. And I know we may have some math people in our audience besides Letha. I know she's probably have done her calculations. 90,000 hours, again, is equivalent to what? 11,000 days, 200 or 2,250 plus weeks. What about 43 years of working? And that is if you start at the age of 18 and you go to at least 62. Now, some of us have started even earlier. I know I started my first job at 14 and I'm still working. So, and I don't know exactly when I'll finish, but I'm getting there. So that is 42 hours of working with people that could be related to you or maybe not. That's a lot of time. We are going to spend some time today talking about cultivating our experiences, not only in education, but our work communities, our faith-based communities. How do we go about cultivating diversity, equity, and inclusion in our everyday lives? I know that prior to us coming live, we had a little conversation about the weather and how I know in Massachusetts, you guys have received some rain. We also received the rain last night. Very, very appreciative of this because we are into our gardens. And just like anything else with the garden, in order to develop what it is that you have planted, there's some work, and it's a lot of work that needs to be done. We first have to figure out our plot, in this case, where we may be working. Once we get there, we have to remove some of the weeds that may be around there in order to get and break up the soil so that we can plant our seeds. And then with that, we have to do a little bit of work by watering that garden. Sometimes it comes naturally, sometimes it doesn't. We have to do a little bit of that work on our own. We have to provide the nutrients for our gardens. We plant fertilizer sometime in order to get what we have planted in there to grow and be able to cultivate. We want to make sure our seeds are real healthy. And so we're doing all that we need to do to make sure that it is constantly growing. We want to remove any weeds to reduce that competition in order for that water and all those nutrients to continue to have us grow. And then, and only then, can we enjoy the fruits of our labor. So just like anything else, no matter what we do in life, there is some work, there is some cultivating, there is some massaging, there is some nurturing that we all have to do in order to get us to grow the way we want us to grow and across the board. That 90,000+ hours, I know that people have their families, their work families, their community families. Who are these people that we're spending these 90,000+ hours with? So I did a little bit of research because, again, if you're in education, you can work with people from, and my earliest was age 4, and my oldest was age 84. I had a older lady wanting to come back to get her GED. So you can work with a very, very diverse group of people. So let's look at that. The greatest generation, we have some of those that are in our workforce. And usually it could be volunteer work or whatever. They just feel that they're continue to be motivated. and want to continue to work. That was our greatest generation, 1901 to 1927. Those majority of those folks probably or could have worked at least 30 years, and they could have worked 30 years doing the same job for the most part. I don't know if you can see that little time card at the very top, but some of you are familiar with that time card. Some of us may not be. But a lot of folks may have used that time card in order to clock in those 90,000 hours of work. And then we have, and that greatest generation, we're looking at a name that pops up would be President Carter. And you know that he was very motivated and wanting to work and continue to work. I think he was doing Habitat of Humanity and working on homes and things of that nature. And then, of course, you have the silent generation from the ages 1928 to 45. That generation also worked about 30 hours. And that silence generation started or had experience with the Great Depression, World War II, very cautious and conscious behavior. These folks are somewhat thrifty, they're loyal and determined. And those are some of the characteristics of that silent generation. Silent generation, individual that I can think of today would be our current president. He is in that silent generation. And one word that sticks out for him would be that determination. Then we move on to our baby boomers. And I would think, I'm not sure, but I would think the majority of the people that are here today are probably in that baby boomer generation. I will confess, I am one of those. 1946 to 1964. And that group, their average hours of working on one particular job would be about 8 years. Now, some of us may work in the same profession, but we may change positions, and it's usually about 8 years. I will say, me personally, I think I was on a 4-year trend. It seems like I did teaching for 4 years, administrator for 4 years, and things of that nature. So it was always on a 4-year trend to me, but I've been in education for a good almost 30 years. This will be my 30th year. Of course, then we have the millennials. That would be our generation Y, 1982, 97. Their average time in a job, maybe about 2.4, 2.5 years. This is our tech savvy. They value flexibility, challenges, and routines. They like to collaborate. And again, they are in jobs about 2.5 years. We move down to our Generation Z. Generation Z young people are very diverse, digital natives. They're very, very savvy with our computers and technology. They're politically progressive and again, very involved and want to see that change. And I know we've worked with some of those individuals. And then, of course, our earliest generation, our youngest generation is Generation Alpha. And we're looking at 2011 to years we haven't even got yet, 2025. And our Generation Alpha, pretty much, they don't necessarily play by the rules. Very interesting generation. But again, if you look at from the greatest generation all the way down to the Generation Alpha, we embrace all of these generations within our work lives, from our elders, or sometimes in our personal lives, and sometimes in our community or our faith-based lives. So we have been exposed to all of these different generations. And it's very, very interesting to understand some of the characteristics and things that they may bring to the table as we begin to progress and continue to cultivate what it is in order to make a more perfect union or a good society. Again, just a quick overview. Again, with the greatest generation, you have Betty White, as I said before, Carter, just to give you a perspective of who these folks are and what generation. Of course, Biden, baby boomers, that would be me. I get to share the stage with Kamala Harris. And then we have Generation X. We have Miguel Cardona, Secretary of Education, I think just this year. Millennials, Pete Buttigieg. Generation Z, Greta Thunberg. I know a lot of you have heard about her. She's a environmentalist activist, very young, I think 18. And then Generation Alpha, Keisha Quest is the youngest Mensa member. I think she just got selected in, and she may be about 2 years old. So at this point, you can see all of these people and all these generations and how they may mix and match and how they began to shape everything that we deal with and even who we are today. So we've had a little bit of time to, or it was a great introduction as to who we are. Let me just add a little bit. I am a product of Ravenna High School in Ravenna, Ohio. My pre-K pretty much to 12th grade. I did get my bachelor's of science at Kent State University. I know a lot of times people hear the word Kent State and they think May 4th, 1970. Yes, I was around, but I wasn't there. I remember when the National Guard was driving down Main Street in Ravenna on its way to Kent. Remember on the playground, running up to the fence and just looking in the fence and just watching, thinking, oh my God, the thing that came to my mind was, wow, the end of the world is coming, because you see all these trucks going down. But for a lot, it was a very tragic time. But whenever people say Kent, that is probably one of the biggest things that they remember, and it should be remembered. I went on and worked at adult ed in Ravenna. Again, as I said before, my oldest student was about 84, and now I work with pre-K centers in Newport News, and my youngest now is 4. Received a master's degree at Old Dominion University in Virginia, and did a great deal of teaching, enjoyed every minute of it. I know we have a middle school teacher on board, and I always say my hat goes off to anybody who is teaching middle school, because they are a very challenging but very wonderful group of young people who is always up and very creative and just want to be able to absorb what you have to offer. Moved into Newport News as an assistant principal and then principal of a high school. And now I am currently working with federal programs, working with millions and millions of dollars in an effort to bring some equity and inclusion across our school division and help the principals and our administrative staff look at what equity and inclusion really looks like in our schools that are in need for additional support and financial support. So I'm going to pause and let not our boomer, but our Gen X introduce ourselves a little bit.
We agreed that I was going to be a Gen Y, a millennial. That's the story I was going to tell. However, it's very difficult to be in the same generation as your children. I'm going to start with the end in mind, because I love where Varinda left off and our interest and our passion for equitable opportunities. I work in federal programs in Newport News Public Schools with Varinda. And yes, we manage and we monitor lots of money, but what the outcome of that monitoring and managing is again to ensure that all students have equal access to the same opportunities so that their playing field is leveled. I am a proud graduate of Newport News Public Schools. So when I talk about my time in Newport News, I've really been there, about 40 years maybe. So I probably should have retired a while ago, but born and raised in Newport News, proud graduate of Newport News. My foundation and my bio was built there. I had so many teachers that took me under their wing and made a difference in my life. And that is what led me to education. When I saw the difference I could make with both students and staff, that's what kept me in education. So I got a bachelor's in math. Martha Askew, my favorite math teacher in high school, said, go to college and major in your favorite subject. And so that's what I did. And when I graduated with my bachelor's, I decided to someone invited me to a teacher fair. Wasn't quite sure what they did at teacher fairs, but I went anyway. And the first face I saw was Martha Askew, and I knew it was meant to be. From there, I gained a master's in education because I was ready to come out of the classroom because I was seeing the mark I could make in the classroom. I was very interested in organizational leadership and improvement, and that led me out of the classroom. And so from that first day in the classroom holding a math book, I traversed several roles in Newport News, including math lead, the department lead for mathematics, assistant principal of instruction, STEM director, and supervisor of mathematics. So those were all roles that started from visiting that teacher fair that day. I left Newport News for just a brief stint. Varinda and I had been together so long, I decided I needed a vacation. And so I left for just a brief stint. And I saw another part of education and another level of disproportionality and equity. And we're going to talk about some of this later. But I worked at the Department of Juvenile Justice as Director of Curriculum and Instruction, where my role was to develop a program or develop instruction to help fill gaps on youth that had gotten off track. Somehow they had slipped through the cracks in normal education and turned to a life of crime. They left education a long time before they turned to a life of crime because it was disjointed. But again, that opened my eyes to the needs of students, the needs of advocates for students, and the needs for the training for those that are in whose care they are charged to. So that is a little bit about me. And yes, Varinda, I am a Generation Xer. So why are we here today? First, I am just excited to be here because this, again, in this world of Zoom, this is a very impactful use of our Zooming. We Zoom all the time. So I'm loving this space to bring us all together. I do not believe in accidents, so I know it's intentional that you have all joined us this Saturday morning. So thank you for giving your time to us. So our goal for today is to increase awareness of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And of course, from our background, we are focusing on the classroom, but it's for the classroom, the workplace, and everywhere that you go. So equity, diversity, equity, and inclusion is a part of all of our engagements throughout the day. So we invite you to take a seat at this table today so that we can discuss, model, and explore the importance of what we will call DEI. We will talk about critical thinking, changing paradigms, cognitive dissonance, and self-introspection that it takes to first understand where we are so that we can motivate others to join into this critical conversation. We will likely ask more questions than we answer today because this is a dialogue, a conversation, at some points a monologue, but it is all to increase the need, increase the awareness, and for us to come together on where this conversation needs to go. So obviously, so as stated, it is, the goal of this is our conversation. Dr. Darius Daniels is probably a millennial minister that I follow. And this quote talks about perspective. Where you sit determines what you see, and what you see determines what you do. I think that is so true in life. So if we broaden our horizons, if we remove obstacles, then we are going to be able to broaden what we see and broaden our reach. Broadening that reach involves expanding our comfort zone. Stephen Covey introduced the circle of influence in his book, the 7, now 8 habits of highly effective people. And so I invite you today, we invite you to step out of your comfort zone. Because once you broaden your circle of influence, you are going to broaden your impact and you are going to see positive outcomes from that. So as you reflect on the characteristics of the various generations that were discussed, do you truly know the people that are in your circle? Why do you think awareness, empathy, opportunity, and engagement are important for understanding DEI? As we continue to work and socialize with people from different backgrounds and experiences, what strategies will aid us in the awareness of their lived experiences? In what ways can we show empathy for another when we're lifting them up? Why is it important to remain flexible in your thinking and actions as you learn others? What's the last opportunity that you created for someone that you do not normally engage with? And finally, how can our awareness, empathy, and opportunity lead to more meaningful engagement? So, as you heard, I like math. So let us do an activity. Actually, Varinda said I could not use calculus today, but please drop me a chat if you want to have a conversation around calculus, one of my favorite subjects. So this is going to be this is our first activity, and this activity is designed to see how maybe difficult sometimes it is to move out of your comfort zone, and sometimes how easy it is to move out of your comfort zone. So here's our activity. Here are the instructions. You can use an invisible pencil using these 9 circles here, or you can jot 9 circles on your own paper and do this in real time. So using 4 or fewer straight lines, I need for you to connect all 9 circles without lifting your pencil, without going through any dot or any circle twice. And we're going to give you 10 seconds to do that. So starting now, please connect all 9 circles with 4 or fewer lines. And Varinda's going to count down.
All right. 7, 4, 2, 1.
Pencils down. One thing that we know as educators is that there is always more than one way to achieve a goal. So I'm going to show you some solutions. Varinda, should we have them switch papers?
Yeah, you know, in education, you always have students switch papers. So if you can share your paper with, oh, wait, we're on Zoom.
Oh,
So no, we're going to have them do some self-reflecting.
okay, so
We have
you're
to
on the
trust
honor
them.
system.
Yeah, we're going to have to trust them to grade their own.
Okay. All right, so let us look at some examples, some sample solutions. And I'm sure our talented and gifted group got this. So 4 lines connecting all 9 dots without going through any one dot or circle twice. Here's one solution. How many tried to do this without going outside of the black rectangle? Why didn't you go outside of the black rectangle? Because I know the first time I tried it, I thought that I had to stay within the confines of the black rectangle and not go out of the boundaries. So this is truly thinking out of the box and working out of the box. Another example, again, more than one way to reach our ultimate goal. This is another example from a different perspective. So you see how we had to extend well beyond the box that was given. And so again, forcing us to go out of our comfort zone. And one more example, I'm sorry.
It's always interesting too, to see where that first line, everybody's first line may also be different. And for that level of connection. So where you may start, someone else may not be in that exact spot of starting. So that's always an interesting characteristic as well.
And so I'll ask you, which one is right, Varinda? The first one or the second one? Starting up or starting down?
Well, how about both?
How about both? How about this one for the overachievers? 3 lines.
Whoa.
Now, I'm going to tell you that this one gave me the most angst. I never thought of using 3 lines. And perhaps you would think it's because I didn't want to think out of the box, but Varinda knows me and she knows I'm always outside of the box. She has to pull me back in sometimes. But what was out of my comfort zone here? Probably my math background, probably my hidden figures background. I love working with numbers and exactness. I was determined to only draw my line through the circle, through the center of the circle. Why? That was not in the rubric. We said to use 4 or fewer lines. connect each of the circles, do not repeat any of them. So this one was the most, probably the most difficult one for me to see. And so it made me look at some of my, some of the reasons or the guidance that I live by or how I problem solve. So how does this look when I engage with others?
So remember how we first started with the 90,000+ hours that you're spending with different people? And sometimes you're sitting next to someone that you think, what are they thinking about? What are they dealing with? How do I go about dealing with that individual? How do I perhaps maybe step out of my comfort zone in order to bring them into my circle? Am I comfortable with thinking outside the box in order to be able to bring them in, or vice versa? Would they be comfortable from what I may bring to the table? So if you really think about the amount of time, 90,000 hours, I am so sorry, but that is a lot of time to spend with people outside of your own family. So all of us, it doesn't make any difference. All of us have only 24 hours in a day. And if you look at our experts and our professionals says that we're supposed to at least try to sleep 8 hours. Some of us are very fortunate to be able to do that. A lot of us are not, but we're supposed to get 8 hours of sleep. We get an average, and I say average, of about 8 hours of work. And then the other 8 hours is usually spent hopefully with some type of leisure, some fun, maybe working with communities and faith-based groups and things of that nature, things that you want to do. But a lot of those extra 8 hours, either with leisure or sleeping, kind of goes into our work. So that is why we have come up with that 90,000 hours. So if we think about that, we think about who are the people that we're spending this time with. This is like our work family, our community families, our social families. You know, we know how much time we spend with our own families, but when we have to step out of that, what do? Do we know anything about these folks? How are we able to get them to understand where we're coming from? And how are we able to understand where they're coming from? And that's a huge, huge task. When we talk about, you know, the cultivating, thinking outside the box, there's a lot going on that we have to deal with on a regular basis. So again, just thinking about those 90 hours and who is in our circle of influence that we can deal with, and how do we deal with them using that great deal of time that we have with them. So if we look at, again, our workforce, I know this is a little bit busy, and I don't know how well you're able to see this, but the baby boomers on the very top line, we are moving down. And as far as our work, we started at about 66% in 1997, and now 2000, this is 2017, so we probably dropped even more. We're at about 41%. So yes, boomers are moving out of the workforce, but who's coming in? We got our millennials coming in and our Gen X. They're rising and they're coming in the workforce. So although we're still there, we still have a seat at that table, and we're still, our heads are still in the game. How are all of us dealing with all of those different generations? As Letha and I told you, we are in education. So when I say we see all of these generations across the board, we are actually dealing with and encounter and work with and mentor and also learning from all of these people. So what do we bring and what do they bring to the table? So there's a lot of diversity going on that we probably don't even think about or recognize, because it's when you talk about diversity, you talk about layers and layers and layers of it. So just looking at our work group, who's around us, who's in the cafeteria with us, who is in the workspace with us, who's on the next cubicle that we're sitting in. Do we know anything about them? Are we trying to get to know anything about them? So we're going to look at a little bit about that. So boomers versus Gen X versus Gen Y. And this is just a quick narrative just to give you an idea of some of the people that you work with or you're talking to, even in your own households. I think I read one of the chats that there was an individual who has several different generations within the household. So how do these people deal with different things? When you look at the word communication, boomers, email, cell phones, again, face-to-face. And I'm going to be honest with you, I am truly a face-to-face. I would rather be doing this in front of you all because I get to feel how you feel and see your faces and be able to understand if I'm reaching you or do I need to go another direction. So I am truly a boomer and I am truly a face-to-face person. However, when we have messages, we got to get that message out the best way we can. So I'll take this. And then Gen X, emails, IM, and then cell phones. Gen Y, texting, cell phones, and IM. I know when we go to restaurants, I have 2 young children, well, they're not children, they're young adults. They're like this the whole time, just texting. And we have a rule now that when we go out to dinner, put the phone down. And anybody who picks up their phone, they get to pay the bill. So go ahead and share that one. People will put the phones down real quick. So then approach to problems. How do we look at problems? Boomers, we want to be able to think about it, work it out, replicate, have meetings and discussions, which is what we do. Gen X, what are they doing? Looking at, think of different ways you want to list out your different solutions. You may even call a meeting. Y, brainstorming, looking at the web, perhaps looking up things, social networking, and doing your research in the web. What do you worry about? Boomers, I'm gonna tell you, one of the things I worry about is retirement. And I'm dealing with that now. Do I have enough to live off of once I step out of the workforce? So that is probably one of our big major things. Do I have healthcare? Do I have all this? So that's one of the things that we worry about. Gen X, work, they want to be able to balance their work life and still have a social life. And they also want to be appreciated. And then Gen Y, what they worry about is what they worry about. That's just them. Respect for them means what? For us, having decades of work experience and input still valued. One of the first things we said, we have 30 years in, 20 something years in. So we do still respect that years of work. And then we say, oh, you know what? They deserve X, Y, and Z because they have that years of experience. Look at Gen X, professionalism and growing knowledge and value the knowledge that they grow. They may be able to gain a great deal of experience and get promoted where boomers or before us may have had to work up that up to that level over a number of years. And then you have Gen Y. They have ideas, they want to be valued, and they also want to work with their coworkers. So if you take all of these, we're all from different generations, we're all looking at things from a different perspective, but we're all working next to one another. We're sitting next to one another. How are we able to incorporate that, bring that into the table so that that level of respect will be done across the board? Very, very important.
Varinda, I wanted to add an example. Going up to the top row, how the different generations choose to communicate. Recently, a colleague reached out to me and asked me to help her daughter negotiate a salary. So I said, oh yeah, have her give me a call. I gave her my phone number and she texted me back and I said, give her my phone number. And she texted me back and said, she will FaceTime you tonight when she gets off work. And I'm thinking, FaceTime? That means, and I was not looking like this at 9 o'clock when she got off. So I had to go back and undo what I had prepared, the me I prepared to go to bed to get that face back on to be camera ready. But it really, really took me by surprise that, oh yeah, she said she'll FaceTime you, but why? But my daughters do all the time.
Right. So again, just looking at just technology alone, I mean, I know a lot of us will be able to give our phones or our computers to a 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old, and they can master it in no time. While we're sitting there still trying to figure out what are some of the things on there that we need to do. So again, I say all that to say there's so many different levels of diversity, and we all have to be able to embrace all of it in order for all of us to be able to grow, and we cultivate our own personal gardens. And as we move on into diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yes.
So if we're looking at how our population is changing, how our world is changing, how, again, the folks that we're working with, and it is changing, folks, and it is changing rapidly. If you look at this chart, and I know, again, small, but I'm just going to kind of summarize it. 2020, this is the population. I do believe it's just the US population. So in 2020, we had, and I'm a round up always, is about 60% white population. By 2060, which is 40 years from now, that 60% is going to decrease to 44%. So you're talking about changes, and that's a pretty big change, 16% reduction. Black population, we're at about 13% in the United States today. In 40 years, we will only have moved up maybe 1% as far as African American population. Hispanic population, today we're looking at 19%. By 2060, we're at 28%. That's an increase of about 11%. Asian, 6% today. 40 years from now, 10% increase. So it's an increase of about 4%. And then multi-generation, 2% today, increased by 5%. So if you add all of people of color, 19 or 20, 30, you're talking what, 40 or so percent, and we're moving, that's today. But in 40 years, it's going to increase dramatically. So what does that mean? Again, looking at that level of diversity, we have to come out of our comfort zone. We have to come out and begin to embrace what is inevitable that is going to change. Because if we don't, nobody will be able to grow. And it would not be the right place for any of us to be at that point. So again, how comfortable are you with embracing all of these changes around you? The generational changes that are occurring right in front of our face, the ethnicity that is changing on a regular basis. And that's just a small layer of all the different levels of diversity that we would have to face on a regular basis.
Thank you, Varinda. Very powerful. So what Varinda gave us to think about, again, I'll reiterate, is who we're spending those 90,000 hours with. I don't know what hour I'm on, but I can truly reflect on the experiences and the interactions I've had over the probably 80,000 hours I've spent so far. So who are they? We talked about them generationally. So basically we talked about the physical aspects, what you see of that person that's in your circle. What do we have in common? What's unique? What are some lived experiences that impact these interactions? And how may this reshape our thinking going forward as we consider how well we know the people we've worked with, been a part of the same organization over an extended period of time, the people you go to church with, you know the commonalities, but there are still so many differences about that person that they don't wear on their sleeve. So think back over time and consider an opportunity you may have wished you took advantage of to learn someone. Maybe you wish that that person could have opened up to you. Were there times where you were hesitant to meet someone because you didn't think you shared similarities? Again, how does this impact your interactions or all of our interactions? So this is what's called a cultural iceberg. And on this slide is where we're going to go a little bit below the surface. We talked about in our introduction, you know that we have college educations, college degrees, because we said that, but we don't know that when we meet a person. We may assume, but what we see are those observable behaviors and practices. And we talked about characteristics that are specific to generations. And I know that you can look back and consider some things that are specific to people in those different generations and how you've engaged with them. So let us delve a bit deeper into both commonalities and differences. The cultural iceberg allows us to consider what we see or experience of a person. So when we consider non-observable aspects or characteristics of a person, that's when we really learn them, because you don't know what religion I am right now. You know, again, my education because I told you. You don't know my salary. You don't know, we did talk about where we were from, but you wouldn't know any of this unless we were in a space was created, and a safe space was created where you could learn my beliefs and values. And those beliefs and values is what's going to open up more awareness for the people around you. So we can look at this another way. Those observable behaviors in practice, those are direct, explicit, conscious. What's beneath the surface is going to force us to get into the implicit parts of our character, of who we are. And to me, the difference between the observable and non-observable, the explicit and implicit, is where a cognitive dissonance is. Because to me, a cognitive dissonance is that vulnerable space where we ourselves have to meet the person that we show up as, so that default person, and the true identity that we hold below the surface. So in defining your cultural identity, define yourself. Look at some of these things below the surface and define them for who you are. And when you define your cultural identity, then that is what you're going to bring to the table. As I said, we're sitting around around the table today, and we are going to go a lot deeper than you typically would when you're just looking at those observable practices. So it requires self-reflection and self-evaluation, and hopefully that is a part of our conversation today. But as we have our conversation, I want you to continue to self-evaluate to see how you've shown up.
You know what, Letha, one of the things about this is kind of interesting. When you look at the top of the iceberg, you think of things that are noticeable. So those are your explicit biases may come out because they're the ones that are noticeable. And then underneath are more of your implicit, where they're not as noticeable, and you have to delve in and go a little bit deeper to be able to understand what is it that I'm doing? How are people perceiving me? And am I communicating or providing them with what I feel I want them to know or understand about me or be able to appreciate me? So that the underneath the iceberg is a big, much larger challenge when it talks about your implicit biases.
Right. So how many times have we looked at someone's observable characteristics and assumed something about them that's below the surface? You can't assume someone's belief based on what you're looking at. So that 100% does talk about implicit and explicit bias, which we're going to discuss as well.
Right.
Thank you. So in the words of Jimmy Carter, we have become not a melting pot, but a beautiful mosaic. Consider this mosaic. Consider everything represented, everyone represented in this picture. So along with this beauty comes opportunities for understanding, respect, and reflection. Consider the differences represented. Consider the interactions you've had with people from different cultures, different nationalities, different genders, of course. And now, as we consider our iceberg, different beliefs, different attitudes. How has that shown up in our interactions? We can also look at this as opportunities to learn things from those whose ideas, beliefs, attitudes, values, and backgrounds are different from our own. As Varinda alluded to, our implicit biases show up when we don't know that they are. So as we continue our conversation, we're going to talk about some of those implicit biases. Right now, we're going to take a station break to see if there are any questions in the chat that we can address at this time, or we can open it up for comments.
So at this point, we have one comment, actually. Heidi Kramer says to everyone, talking about time, when you were talking about time, I'd like to vote for a year of paid maternity leave that other countries have.
Yes. Yes.
I can totally agree with that, because then it allows you that time you need to do all that bonding and, recovering and going through all that. I totally agree. I remember when I was teaching, and I had a teacher and her husband both come in from Canada, and they were hired in our school system. And when she was pregnant and had a child, and we told her she'd had anywhere between 4 weeks to 12 weeks. And she was like in awe, like, I can't believe that. Even in Canada, I think they gave him at least 6 months. So I agree with you that there is some time that's needed, because we give so much and we need to be able to get back as well.
Right.
I agree.
We do a lot of data and stats. So I'm going to add to that with some stats that I have not refreshed in a while. But in some research I did years ago, United States was one of 3 countries that did not have a very liberal maternity leave. And these were the same 3 countries that also chose not to learn the metric system years ago. I believe that was Jimmy Carter as well. It could be incorrect, but that talks about some of the culture in the United States. So thank you for that, Heidi.
Right. Exactly. Thank you.
Anyone else have a comment that they'd like to either express verbally or type in the chat?
Well, I have a comment. I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I know you. One of you mentioned something about the media is. Our circle of influence.
Mm-hmm.
I think the media has a lot of. Unfortunately, it has a lot of influence on our children.
Yes.
And the people as well. And it's pretty sad because a lot of people, like, they think our people, especially when they see us walking the streets, they might our men hold their purses, because in Ohio I see a lot of that. And it's pretty sad because I have a son, and he's got to be one of the nicest guys in the world, and a lot of things have happened to him, and he's a borderline genius, but he's had a lot of events happen to him, and it's really sad that those type of things happen. They're still happening. And I also have a doctor friend of mine, and she has said, she's even wrote a book about this. The media paints an ugly picture of our people, and she's a white doctor, and she said in her office she's noticed that everyone, the blacks will speak to when they're waiting to see her, they have to speak first. In Ohio, I don't know if it's all over, but I can only speak here. They will speak to people first, and the other ones will not. The whites will not speak to anybody.
That
I don't know why that is.
Oh, I'm
Right.
sorry.
I don't know why that is.
I would say, and Lisa, you can jump in anytime. I agree with the media has a huge influence as to how people are perceived across the nation. As we know that a lot of negativity, where African Americans are depicted as very negative. And you mentioned your son. I have a son and a daughter, both with dreads, and they are probably perceived, that's the first thing they may see is those dreads, and create this, implicit bias because of what they may have seen or how they connect those images. So that is why it's so important to be able to delve in and begin to really look at who's around you and try to learn a little bit or a lot more about them, so that you can better understand and also help shape the political system as it is, with what is being perceived across the media, what is being perceived across everywhere. It's just not in the media, it is in our classrooms. I mean, it is everywhere. So we all have to do our own individual. They say, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So we all have to do our piece to make sure that we are bringing this to the forefront and being willing and able and comfortable enough to address it. So Valerie, you do have a wonderful point with how the media depicts us and other people of color across the nation, and just have to be ready to be honest about what it is that's really going on. Lisa, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Well, your last statement is exactly what I was going to say. It starts with us. And so it is the awareness of it's what we're doing today. We're bringing awareness. We're having a conversation. We're not solving anything today, but it is bringing that awareness and knowing that people have experiences that have shaped them. So when your son has had these experiences and he goes into a new environment, he's taking those experiences with him. I was a lucky person 13 years ago. I was an empty nester. We had children in college, and then I found out I had a son on the way. And so that son is now 13. His older sisters are in their 30s. And I have a 13-year-old son, and I look at the climate of the world right now, and that awareness is equipping him with what he needs to walk into this world. But in the circles, wherever I have a voice, wherever I have the mic, I am going to express the need for awareness for everyone. So it is self-reflection, it's trust, it's knowledge. And hopefully that's what we're trying to help start a conversation about today. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
So we have a question from a 9-year-old student, Yara, who you two just met. So Yara asks, how do you know if you're out of your comfort zone?
Wow, that is a very, very good question. And it really, I would think how do you embrace, or how do you see other people that are around you? Are you able and comfortable to walk up to someone who may be a little bit different from you, who may sound a little bit different from you, who might be enjoying a different type of food? And are you able to have conversation with that person? And if not, then you ask yourself why. What is it about me that I'm not able to step out and do that? And that's across the board for all of us. What is it about us? You know, it's always like pointing the finger back at us. What is it about me that I'm not able to get to that next point? And then you have to do some self-reflecting, maybe even do some researching, because again, no one answer for anything, but and again, I think the researching and self-reflecting and having someone that you're most comfortable with talking with. I am so blessed that I have several different circles, that if something I'm not agreeing with or I feel uncomfortable with, I have several people that I can address things with to help me get back on target. And I'll be the first to say, you know what, I may not be looking at it right. Please help me understand. And it's always me. I need to know. I need to know. Let me get out of my comfort zone. I'm going to mention Dr. Claudia Hines because I believe she's on. She is one of my go-to people. Letha is one of my go-to people. And of course, all of my family. We have conversations on a regular basis. So you find those people that may be in your comfort zone, and you begin to ask questions to help to allow you to be able to move beyond that comfort zone. So even if you're not, ask yourself a few questions to figure out, where am I in this spectrum and how do I move to the next chapter? Lisa, add on?
Yes, I would like to add to that. Thank you so much, Ms. Yara, for asking. I asked you to reflect on any time you've done something for the very first time, because when you do something for the very first time, that feeling you have is your old you pushing you to something new. So that is what's called cognitive dissonance, because you're using a new behavior. So you go and tell the other 9-year-olds, I'm going to use my cognitive dissonance to push me out of my comfort zone to make a difference. But anytime, and that's for any of us, Yara, even at this age, when we do something for the first time and you have a reaction where you don't understand how you're feeling and you're nervous about it, that feeling is because you're stepping out of what you know into something new. And I ask you to cherish those times and look at what works and what you can change the next time. So that is a comfort zone. Excellent question.
So we have a question from Emily Green. Do you feel it would be helpful to have training yearly regarding racial issues?
You know what? I see training not only just yearly, but every day, all day. I hate to say it, we have so much work to do and so much to uncover. And as we talked about at the very beginning with the gardening, you have to pluck out all those negatives and begin to have your garden flourish. So it's not only a seasonal or, a 1 month or, where you only do it for a short period of time. It needs to be on a regular basis. How that looks, I mean, it could come to several different forms. I think Letha will talk about some of the different ways to bring that to the table. But I think it's an ongoing process. And yes, it could be formed, like a traditional, like in the classroom or things of that nature. But to me, it's one of those ongoing things, and not when we say yearly, it's all year, all day, every day.
Definitely. When you look at the George Floyd situation, you notice I'm an online shopper. That's something beneath my iceberg too, unless you live in my house and see the Amazon boxes. But I'm always online, and any thing I clicked on, you would see in the mission and the vision that there was a statement. And I don't know if it's my discernment, because I believe I have it. I can feel you through a screen, but some of that seemed like it was checking the box. So to me, if you have something that's going to address something this complex, that much above the surface and miles beneath the surface, it definitely has to be ongoing. In education, we have training all the time, and sometimes we do it once in the beginning of the year. The teacher doesn't need to use it until February, and that training, this feeling that we're feeling today, is going to be gone by December. And so you want to keep that fresh, you want to keep that knowledge fresh, and you want to learn from it, because you are going to uncover things that you are going to have to address at that time. If not, it can be viewed as checking the box.
Let's see, we have a new question from Jamie Winnell to everyone. How do you see the relationship between holding high expectations for all students and staff and having the mercy and grace that comes with trauma-informed care so that people's mental health and emotional health is in a state where they can learn? There's another question also. Do you want to deal with that one first and then go on to the second one? Or should I say the second one as well?
Okay, we can start with that one. We're going to talk about a little later, and we love this because we're educators, and we will chuck a lesson plan that we worked on for a month to make sure that we're addressing the needs of our audience. So we'll talk about equitable access. When we had to transition to online learning, that was new for everyone. And one of the things that we did in Newport News was to ensure mental health care for both the staff and students. We did a lot more mindfulness. We reached out, we hired staff that addressed mindfulness, but not everyone is going to get there at the same time. Not everyone is going to get there the first time, but equitable access is what we always stress, because we have to understand the student to understand the accommodation and the supports they need. So high expectations is for everyone. When I was at the Department of Juvenile Justice, what I helped to implement was a differentiated, a personalized learning model. And what that means is I'm meeting you where you are and I'm taking you where you need to be. I had juveniles who were 18 who dropped out in maybe 7th or 8th grade. So I couldn't put them in 12th grade courses and expect them to flourish. So we had to fill gaps along the way. And sometimes you have to veer away from norms and standards in order to fill those gaps that a student needs. And that 100% includes the trauma informed. You have to address the trauma and not just say you'll get over it, because we know it's much greater than that. Again, at the Department of Juvenile Justice, students by the 12th grade may have had one major trauma in their life, maybe the divorce of a parent. The students that were in charge to my care there as an instructional leader had 3 to 4 major traumas in their life. So you have to address that before you can tell them to go and take this calculus test.
Right. And I want to focus on the high expectations,
Yes.
because as educators, that is something that we all expect. We all have to set that parameter. And I'm one of those people in my classroom, as well as a principal. If you set it here, that is that's where they're going to be. If you set it higher, then that's what they rise to. So I am a firm believer in setting high expectations. It is a difficult thing to do. You want to be able to pull all those around you to have those same level of expectations as it relates to the students. The students are looking for you to be a model as to what you are expecting of them. And so not only are we setting the high expectations, but we also have to model what it is that we expect from those. And sometimes, and maybe a lot of times, we also have to model what is expected for our peers or our colleagues or people that we work with, because everybody is not on the same page that you are. If you in the classroom or you're an educator, you know, you hear, you see, you can feel whether or not a child is really being able to benefit from what you have to offer or what that teacher next to you. I know in middle schools, I don't know if you do the clustering, a child may go from me to Letha's class, and they may feel more comfortable in Letha's class than they do in my class, but it's up to me to go to her and say, you know, I'm not getting the same results that you're getting. What is it that I need to do in order to reach this child? Because that is our ultimate expectations, is to improve our students. As a principal, and I'm gonna tell you, it warmed my heart. I used to have to go up and do the commencement ceremonies. And I remember I think it was my last year that I was a principal. I used to every day get on the loudspeaker during the school year, and I would say, high expectations, respect the faculty and staff, respect the peers, but most of all, respect yourself. And that's what you have to do, whether we're adults or students. We have to respect ourselves first. And once we do that, and once we learn how to do that, and once we're able to cultivate what that looks like, then we can move on. And I remember that year, I was doing my last words, and I said, remember, respect the faculty, respect your peers, and everybody in all my students said, but most of all, respect yourself. And that warmed my heart. I was like, yeah, they got it. You have to say it more than one time, but eventually they do get it. So high expectations, set them, don't deviate. You might have to tweak, or when I say don't deviate, don't lower it, but you may have to tweak it in order to meet your needs and the students' needs. But don't give up on the expectations, but also do some reflecting along the way.
So a related couple of questions to what we were just talking about. What is also the relationship with the changing societal structures that affect mental health, racism, poverty, homophobia, et cetera? How do you see educators, parents, and educational leaders in changing these societal conditions for our students and our communities?
Right. So as I mentioned, when we transition to, this is specific to Newport News, when we transition to the virtual model, we hire staff. Education is so full of research. We're always researching to ensure that we are changing with the times. So what you will see in the structures of education are the positions that are going to support students beyond instruction, because we know that not everyone is going to sit in a classroom and receive the instruction that the teacher is delivering in the same way. Going back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if your basic needs aren't met, you are not going to be able to focus. And that's where the structures need to change. If you look at missions and visions, even in organizations now, you look at that care of the mental health care that they're putting on the front lines. When we all get out of this and return to a more normal situation, we all are going to have to deal with some paradigm shifts and some differences that have occurred. Some of us, Varinda and I, are a lot alike in where we internalize things and we just keep moving. And then you have an incident that's going to trigger you to think about everything you handled over the last few years. And so that has to be in the forefront. And again, when you look at companies, when you are attached to companies, look at those mission and visions and seeing what they're putting in place. Because I know in education, like I said, we're ever changing. We have people in specific, everyone has a role. That's a mantra we use in my family. Everyone has a role and you play your position. But we increase the roles to ensure that students, again, have every access and opportunity that's available to them. And again, extend it to staff as well.
Right. I know Lisa and I talked about the fact that we work for federal programs, and I know anybody that's in education understands all the CARES Act and the ARF, but it's all under CARES. There is funds that are provided to be able to support our most recent changes in our educational society. So in order to, there's funds to provide that additional support for social emotional, because the students are going through it, the parents are going through it, the teachers are going through it, administrators are going through it. So we're all being, all have to deal with all of those aspects that has changed our society. And it is a lot of changes going on. So I know with our funding, because we have been allotted additional funding under CARES, we are able to provide some additional support as it relates to social emotional training. We have, just additional people or resources. I always like to say people, because there's nothing better than a one-on-one or a small group or things of that nature in order to help individuals move to the next chapter. We have dynamite counseling services in our division, led by a dynamite individual, who really cares, and it's all about the kids and the parents and the teachers. Like I said, it's across the board. So if we recognize that there is an issue, we begin to develop and put things in place in order to address those social emotional needs. We also have in our school system an equity and inclusion director's position, that their whole purpose is to focus on the equity, the inclusion, and also looking at the social emotional to try to bring in to address the needs of our entire school division. So there's a lot going on. There's still a lot to be done. And, as we learn, we try to address or try to seek out ways to figure out what direction we need to go in order to help and support our folks and support ourselves from that perspective.
And if I could just piggyback on what Varinda and Letha are speaking to, I think a lot of time we focus on our students, as we should, but we also need to focus in on our faculty, on our staff, on our administrators, because some of the same struggles that our students have, the adults have as well. So when we talk about training and if it should be yearly, I agree it should be ongoing, but ongoing not just for our students. You can't model what you don't believe in and what you don't know. So I think that training needs to be extended as well to our faculty and staff, and not assume that they're in a place that they're not. Trauma is just not isolated to our kids only. Right. Trauma also extends to our faculty, to our staff, to our administrators as well. So I think just having your hand on a pulse in a building of what is needed and making sure that everyone is getting the proper training and ongoing training that they need to move forward with that.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Hines.
Yes.
Welcome.
I'd like to say something as well. As she stated, it's also with the parents as well.
Oh, yeah.
And the social emotional, it has been going on for years, not just 2 years, but especially with our people, it's been going on forever, for as long as we've been in this country. And when she hit on that, I know you all said, just speak what's coming out in you. And as you all were speaking, I was almost in tears, because when you all were speaking on this, it brought back a lot of memories for me. And these 2 years, this is not this, what we've been going through with this pandemic, this thing has been going on for me. I'm a baby boomer, and I remember things that my mother has gone through, and I remember things that my grandparents have gone through, and that they've told me about. And this is just this nothing as far as I'm concerned. But I just see that the country is now going through it. Has gone through it. But and they're helping the country, but they didn't help us. All these lies. I'm still going through social and emotional trauma. But we didn't get psychology. We didn't get help, mental help.
Right.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Right.
And I'm still in pain for that. And I know that sounds crazy, but it's real. And but I commend you young ladies for bringing this out. And I'm so happy that something's going on in the schools. I've been to China. I see what they do in their school systems. My son worked in China. He taught accounting and economic in China. And he's spoken in Mandarin. He taught it in Mandarin. And I watched this and I was like, wow, this is amazing. I commend teachers. I commend what you all do. And they are so great what they do in China. But they don't do enough. I don't think that they, in this country, that they do enough for teachers. And I think more money should go to the system, the school systems in America, and so that our children can feel better about learning. Okay,
Right.
And that's all I have to say.
And
Thank
you
you
made
so
a good
much.
point about the amount of time and how we're still going through social emotional. You're 100% correct.
Mhm.
And once we recognize it and are willing to even talk about it, that is one of the battles. And if we can continue to move and recognize that, yes, we're all going through that, we continue to go through it. And now what do we do about it? What are some of the things that we need to put in place so that we can begin all of that healing and not have it move to the next generation? And it's uncomfortable. I think people are stepping out of their comfort zones, but I personally think we're moving, maybe not as fast as I would like, but we are moving in the right direction, that it is now being recognized and people are beginning to take that step. And, like I said, one bite at a time. Yeah.
Yes, agree.
So we will move on. So I know we're running out of time. We probably won't get through everything, but we'll try to expedite it so that we can hit a few more things.
Dr. Hines, is your hand still up?
No, I just don't know how to take it down.
That is okay. Okay, so we're going to move on.
All right. So
Thank you so much
yeah.
for your questions.
Yeah, I love the questions. And it kind of segues right into our next few slides here. When we talk about looking at our educational system and who's in front of our kids and what are they bringing to the table in order to make sure that we're moving this generation to something that is even more prominent and more promising than what our generations have had to deal with. And I know, Valerie, you talked about what are we doing as educators and how are we addressing this? And those are dynamic questions. And again, it leads to these next couple of slides. If we look at, I told you I'm a data person, you look at who's in front of our kids today. 2003 and 4 versus 15, 16. I couldn't find most recent. I think the most recent was 17, 18, but it was somewhat close. But if you look at majority of the people who are in front of our students are white teachers. You have about 7% Black, 9% Hispanic, and 2% Asian. So what do we need to do to make sure that those folks who are in front of our next generation is able to deal with that generation and be able to bring them, respect their culture, respect that diversity, challenge it, and have those high expectations and keep moving them forward. So if you look at the data, you can see that no, that was fine. I want to go to the next one. You're good. Okay. Looking at, you have majority white teachers, but when you look at the students, what do the students look like? this data, again, 2000 to 2027. So it's giving you a projective of what our student population is going to be looking like as far as public school in the next few years. We went from 61% white to, by 2027, which is only what, 6 years from now, 45% white. Black population continues to stay pretty much steadfast, and then Hispanic population continues to go up. Asian went up about 1 or 2%, American Indian, and then more than one race has gone up 1%. So if you look at our student population versus our people who are in front of those kids, it looks totally different. So it really is our responsibility to be able to look at what are these people bringing to the table when they're in front of our I say our precious jewels, our next generation, this next group. So we need to do some analyzing, looking at, making sure that our teachers, our administrators, our anybody who's dealing with our young people are ready to deal with our young people in every aspect. So if you always do what you always done, you always get what you always got. So, and I say that in relations to education. We have to move. We have to step out of our comfort zone and begin to look at how we're educating our kids. We got Savannah, we got Jaden, we got Angel, Charles, Eleanor's, we got all kind of kids out there, and it's up to us to be able to change what needs to be changed in order to make them more comfortable with stepping out of their zone and recognizing when they're able to step out of their zone to embrace all the difference and the diversities around them. So we have to step out of our comfort zone. If not, we'll end up just like we did 10, 20, 30 years ago. No difference. And I know Valerie talked about being able to embrace some of the emotions and some of the trauma that was forced on us. We have got to step out of that zone in order to recognize and be able to move forward so that it will not continue.
Varinda, that's exactly what I was going to do. Go back to Valerie's point to
Right.
say that this quote from Henry Ford is far reaching. It is in the classroom. It is in the school district. It is in businesses. It is in the culture and climate of the US right now and the world.
And the
If
media.
we
I know
do
she
what
mentioned
we
the
did,
media. It's also in
exactly.
the media. Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
It is paramount that we do not continue doing
Right.
what we've always done anywhere.
Right. So I know we have a few educators and parents and community faith-based people on. I look at these two images as what COVID did and what our society has done. We have gone through some winding roads. This happens to be a beautiful spot in Lebanon that I was so blessed to be able to go to. And a very winding road, very interesting place. And then you look at the other image where it's an escalator, but we're moving up. If you look at both images, they look a little bit dark, but they're very challenging. But if you look beyond the horizon, you'll see the light at the end of the tunnel, as we would say. So when we look at COVID and we look at the race issues that we have, if we do what we need to do, we can get to that light at the end of the tunnel. And it's going to take all of us in order to reach that. Congratulations to our parents, to our students, to our teachers, to our administrators for being able to manipulate and change within a dime as it relates to COVID and how everything had to switch. We went from brick and mortar to virtual and trying to keep everybody as steadfast as we can. But with that, we have gained a lot of knowledge, hopefully, to know that we cannot always do what we've always done, because if we do, we'll always get what we always got. And we know that what we got before or what we had was not the right thing, but this has given us an opportunity to look beyond. Yes, it was some winding roads. Yes, it's an uphill battle, but there's a light at the end of the tunnel if we're all able to bring what we need to bring to the table and recognize our issues and our deficiencies in order to move to the next chapter.
Definitely. Thank you, Varinda. So let us jump into some definitions. Something that I say a lot is so what, now what? And that's not to take any subject or any context lightly, but to me, that means we've done the triage, we've done the needs assessment, We see this, so what are we going to do? From our lens, from our capacity, from our reach, what are we going to do about it? Right. So let's define DEI so that we're all on the same starting page. As we said, the goal of this presentation was to increase the awareness. And I think we can even change it, Varinda, to say to engage in this conversation so that we take it out into our groups and have similar conversations to get that momentum started. So the SHRM, the Society of Human Resources Management, defines diversity as the differences in people in the lived experiences that they bring with them to any setting. This includes age, cultural backgrounds, physical abilities and disabilities, neurodiversities, race, religion, gender, and sexual orientation. Equity, the fair treatment and access, opportunity, and advancement for all individuals, all individuals. Here is where we identify and work to eliminate barriers to fair treatment so that every person can benefit from access to supports and resources needed to make their opportunities the same as others. We always think from the lens of an educator, and we always think about students, but today we're including everyone in on this. Valerie talked about some of those traumas, those long-lasting traumas that still have not been dealt with. So what can we do? How does this conversation start to bridge those gaps? Inclusion. SHRM defines inclusion as the achievement of an environment in which all individuals are then treated fairly and respectfully, have equal access to opportunities and resources, and can contribute to the organization's success. So we're all at this table. Imagine pick someone that barely knows you, being at the table, advocating for you without your being there. So that inclusion is having the right people around the table. And we can even, looking back at the iceberg, we can even look at the intersectionalities of people's identity that weighs in these different definitions and how those create differences in how people experience the world. So again, why DEI? Why diversity, equity, inclusion? It encourages perspectives and respect for opinions beyond our own. You've heard comfort zone intertwined throughout this presentation. We need to step away from what we know. And as Yara said, stepping out of that, how do you know you're out of that comfort zone? Because it's not comfortable. There's a big piece. It's not comfortable. You have removed your safety net, your safety support, and you're making yourself vulnerable to hear what others say. I have been in many settings where the leader said they wanted to start this conversation, and before we take it on, my advice is always that you have to be ready to listen to the answers. You have to be ready to act on what you hear. DEI also improves cognitive skills and critical thinking. It improves that self-reflection and introspection. As educators, we reflect on a continuous basis. Teachers may reflect on their lessons after each class. A school year has natural breaks or interims on which to reflect. The summer is a great time for introspection to determine if you're going back in the fall, because sometimes it's rough. But that critical thinking and introspection leads you to new goals. I firmly believe that if we reflect and think about our failures and shortcomings, self, groups, organizations, nationally, then we are able to use them to inform our future actions. In education, when opportunities and supports are not equitable, schools become more segregated, and then our societies become more diverse. And that's working in the opposite direction. Varinda's going to talk about that a little later as well. So some of the other benefits, it promotes engagement among all members. Everyone needs a seat at the table to advocate for themselves, because you may not directly describe what I'm going through. So I'm the best person to sit down to help make those decisions. Employee retention, we talked about those 90,000 hours. When we have true programs and initiatives in an organization and each employee knows that their voice is valued and heard, then they're more willing to stay there. I've been with Varinda 20 years. I tried to leave, I came back because I value working with her. It prepares our young Yaras and Savannahs for global competition and global citizenship. Valerie said her son worked in Japan. I have been in the contiguous United States for most of my life. I've visited a few places, but I've never lived and thrived and been a part of a community outside of the United States. Reduces the illusion of inclusion. Don't tell me on your mission and vision page that you are a proponent of DEI, but when I visit with you and I do tours of your working day, I'm not seeing inclusion because you say it does not make it inclusion. And it pushes your limits. We have to get out of our own way to expand room to bring others in, because it's not always about our opinion and our needs, but it's bringing others in to genuinely listen to them.
So I know that we are at our time limit, so
Yes.
we're gonna probably do a little bit of pausing after this slide to ask if anybody has any additional questions. As you know, Letha and I could go on for days. We could do 2 or 3 more of these, and because this is our passion. But like anything, change happens and we have to embrace the change. We have to be prepared to do that change. This was a very interesting slide in the sense that this is our preamble. It's license plates. I'm one of these people, when I travel, I like to read people's license plates. But it talks about we the people in order to form a more perfect union. And that is our goal. We're constantly trying to think about how do we go about forming that more perfect union. And we're not going to do it unless we recognize within ourselves that we may have some issues, we may have some things that we need to address, and that's across the board, in order to recognize them and be prepared and be willing to listen and be willing to reflect and be willing to engage and be willing to share how we feel, and kind of even stepping out of our comfort zone. It is never, ever easy sometimes to address someone for something that you may not be 100% comfortable with. You have to find that time to do it. You have to find a person that you can be comfortable with in order to be able to reflect. As I said earlier, it is so important to go do your research. Before you start doing anything, do your research. Learn from yourself first, and then try to branch out. With the Constitution, you know that we have 26 amendments. There's things that's always changing. We know that there's some additional changes that need to occur. And I'm doing my job. That's me trying to help write my next 27th amendment here. So we know that there's change that has to go. So we are looking for you all to help us and help our next generation be able to recognize those changes, be willing to address them, be willing to help them move to the next chapter, help our young people to be able to flourish and really begin to identify Americans' ills and help them move toward, again, that more perfect union. Letha, if you want to add, we're going to probably bring it together. We won't continue because I think we're at our time.
Okay. There is a slide. I'm going to advance. Actually, let me go a little further. You see, we had a bit of things that we wanted to show you, but let us end here. So, considering everything that we discussed today, it was really a beginning, an entry into the conversation of DEI. But what we really wanted to get across is moving to equity, justice, and inclusion. So when you look at inequality, when you look at the first slide here, we're going through the quadrants, the math quadrants. So when you look at inequality, you have unequal access to opportunities. You see the person on the right happens to get produce and a resource. The one on the left, the one on the right gets nothing because nothing is in his environment. And so then laws came in and rules came in that said, well, how about equality? Give everyone ladders they can reach the tree. Okay, we still need to do some more monitoring, all right, because we still have not ensured equal access to the products for the person, right? We gave the exact same accommodation and it was not good enough. That goes back to Heidi's question. And so then equity came into the conversation and we customized the accommodations that we gave, but still we're not hitting the mark. We're not achieving our desired outcome. And so we look at justice. And to me, here is where inclusion fits in, because when we got here, we conducted that needs assessment to determine the needs and the desired outcomes. We provided differentiated supports for equal access, and we monitored the cultivation along the way to ensure that the desired outcomes were achieved. And now we can celebrate a successful plan, but must still carefully monitor and adjust to ensure systemic benefit.
So one other slide, I have to push this one in. This is the Virginia teacher license requirement. I know someone asked, what can we do or how are we moving in that direction? I have to say that Virginia has addressed some of those with the House Bill 1904. The big thing is instruction and training for cultural competency, as well as African-American history. So one of the things that you have to do in order to be relicensed in Virginia, if you're looking for relicensure or just your first time being licensed, you do have to take a cultural competency course, as well as if you hold a social science degree, you have to take an African-American history course. So yes, it's not the end all. It is a step towards where we need to go. So I have to, hat goes off to Virginia in that sense, because, and I am a social science person, so I do appreciate the opportunity of our history teachers being able to, or social science classes having to take this African-American class. As we said, if we always did what we always done, we always get what we always got. So we have to make those changes. We have to make those amendments. We have to bring in things so that we are prepared to deal with our young people across the board.
So a quick quote as we end. We are sorry that we didn't have enough time, because an inch wide and a mile deep, I tell you. We cannot become what we need to be remaining what we are. And I think that's what we wanted to, the message we wanted to leave with you. We thank you so much for this opportunity. It has been a pleasure. We wish it were in person so that we could truly engage and learn from you all. But this is who we are, our contact information. We are more than happy to do part 2. We are ready and able. This was amazing. I'm just sorry we didn't have enough time.
Again, and please allow us to thank the Racial Justice Rising for inviting us to do this. Again, we are all about pollinating what we do and what we love, and that is educating and cultivating our societies around us. So again, our hat goes off to you all for doing what you do in order to do that. And I've watched a few of your videos on YouTube, and I say, keep doing what you're doing. My hat goes off to you. Yes. And thank you so much for allowing us this time.
Amen. Amen.
Thank you.
Can you guys do a part 2?
Right. Emily, do you have some closing words?
I do. I would like to thank these 2 wonderful women who have come and really given an enlightening and an inspiring presentation. Varinda Robinson and Letha King Brooks, thank you so much. I know I've learned a lot. And I'm not a teacher, I'm just a nurse. And I think it's just incredible what you've given us. We also want to thank Michael Nix for his tech support, Shin for her introduction. And if you can bear with me, we want to thank the local cultural councils from the towns of Amherst, Asheville, Berniston, Buckland, Charlemont, Hawley, Conway, Deerfield, Gill, Greenfield, Heath, Montague, New Salem, Northfield, Orange, Rowe, Shelburne, Warwick, Wendell, and Whately. And thank you all of you, the participants who came and to hear these inspiring words. We definitely need this, and our children are our future. Thank you.